Joins me now. He is the CEO of Viollis Group International. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Vlad.
All right. So, what a tale of two cities.
No
right?
question.
Let's talk about this decision to indict this officer in the case in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What do you make of that?
They had to do it. There's no question about it. And the reason why is because when you take a look at police procedure and the law and how those two are going to be married on this situation, she was forced with a situation of exercising deadly physical force, which was not warranted. And thanks to the videotape, it clearly proved that he was not armed. So clearly, there is no question about it. They had to go ahead and indict her, and the charge being correct on manslaughter, because what she did was clearly unwarranted. There was no reason to exercise deadly physical force.
All right, Paul, you've had a long career in law enforcement. There's a lot of people in the African-American community who feel that if this tape did not exist, that officer could say that she was in fear of her life, and she would not be in the situation that she finds herself in today. How much validity can you give to the African-American community when they say that happens time and time again?
100%. You can't deny the empirical data. You can't hide behind anything when it comes to that. That's a legitimate concern, because absent that videotape, what you would have is the testimony of one officer and three other officers. Now, Vlad, what does that remind you of? That's Baltimore.
Yeah, right.
Right? You got a guy in Baltimore who died from a crushed voice box in a truck. Really?
Yeah.
Now, if there was a videotape there, that would have been different. Those cops walked. We know that. She's not going to walk because of the videotape, because it showed she was wrong. Listen, if a cop does the wrong thing, no good cop, Vlad, will ever support a bad cop. And that's
and we should point out that she's innocent until proven guilty. But one of the other interesting facets of this case is that her fellow police officer pulled his taser when he was confronted with Mr. Crutchers, and she pulled her revolver. Give us a sense of police procedure. What is it? I'm just trying to understand why he would pull a taser and she'd pull her gun.
It's an excellent question. So let's talk about really the benchmark of that, Vlad. It's called the use of force continuum. And that's what police officers all over the country are taught, from verbal commands to the use of deadly physical force. The taser is what's referred to as an impact weapon. So I don't have to go to actual deadly force by using a firearm if I can subdue the individual without using lethal force. The taser in that case was clearly the right way to go. Prior to that, if you think of the genesis of impact weapons, the nightstick, the PR-24, the ASP, things like that. The taser is a really solid impact weapon. It doesn't hurt the human being, and it ensures that you don't have to use deadly physical force. So the officer that went to the impact weapon was the right choice. The officer that went to exercise deadly physical force in this case, wrong choice, not justified.
When do you expect that she will turn herself in?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, she's going to be represented by either the FOP or the PBA, and they're obviously in negotiations with the DA's office of how that's going to work. But her defense attorney is going to have a very difficult time defending her with respect to what you just mentioned, that videotape. Videotape's not going to lie in that case.
I also, the question that a lot of people have is police unions. They generally come out from the very beginning and say the officer was right, we have to trust the officer. And understanding, I mean, we've been talking about what happened here in New York City over the weekend. Right. These officers running to the scene of where there may have been another explosive device. Everybody running the other way, these officers running to that scene to try to figure out what was going on. And so there's a lot of bravery and courageousness that goes into the job. But this idea that police unions generally come out and say, look, the officer's always right, the perp is always wrong.
Wrong. And we can't take that. And the reason why that's wrong for the police unions to take, and I was a part of the FOP when I was on the job, the reason why is because you lose credibility, Brad. You have no validity there. Cops are not always right. Look, we have 1.2 million police officers in the United States. And the fact is about 1% misrepresent the badge. But you don't get a pass. Police officers are held to a higher standard. Constitutionally, that's why we have the fighting words doctrine, right? We're held to a higher standard. So it really diffuses, it accelerates the argument, if you will, of why police are not being taken seriously and given respect right now. Because if you jump to the plate automatically and say, listen, I got to defend the cop, any good cop is going to look at that and say, yeah, that's no good.
Let me ask you, I know we're going to talk about this a little later in the show and have more reporting on North Carolina, but there, in that particular instance, the police department has chosen not to share the videotape, and there are a series of legalities as to why they've decided not to do that. But do you think, in just your opinion, your estimation as a law enforcement analyst, that it probably would go a long way in soothing some of the tensions if the police officers are saying this is how it happened and we have the videotape that shows that? Well, then why not just show it to the public?
Because they're afraid of what the public is going to do when they see it. If that videotape, Vlad, was going to diffuse the situation, they'd have shown it days ago. They know, and here's the problem with that. When you look at the disparity between Tulsa and Charlotte, the use of force continuum is going to go on trial in Charlotte. Why? Because the individual was armed, but the gun was facing down. So now you've got to be able to say, were you really in imminent fear of your life? If the individual who's armed is having a gun in his hand, but it's facing down, there's no overt movement, they can't say that he was coming up to shoot, and you exercise deadly physical force. That's going to be a problem. It's going to also go to the fact that you got a cop that's on the job for 2 years, Vlad. 2 years. He made plain clothes after the first year. Really? That's pretty good. So now they're going to go back and take a look at his training. The same thing that they will do with her. But everything is going to come on, with respect to Charlotte, everything is going to come down to that use of force continuum. Did he feel, was he justified by exercising deadly physical force? Can he justify the fact that he felt an imminent fear of his life? That's going to be a hard thing to prove when the gun is facing down.
Understanding, Paul, that every case is different. Every situation is unique. Every officer, every perpetrator or suspect is unique. There are some activists, civil rights activists, who've sort of scratched their heads and have said, how does a suspected terrorist survive a shootout with several police officers? How does Dylan Roof survive a capture after killing so many people? The activists will say these are both white men, and black men, generally speaking, don't survive a situation where they've got their hands up. How do you explain that to the African American community?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, if we're going to go by your first question with respect to the suspected terrorist that was shot in New Jersey, you've got two officers that are at close range. Believe me, they were not trying to shoot him in the shoulder. These guys are trying to kill him, and they missed. Okay, I'm sorry, Vlad. I wish I could.
Because that's what I've always been told. Police officers, when you start firing, when you pull the weapon, you're shooting to kill. You're not shooting to wound.
Right. This is not the movies here. All right. This is really when you exercise deadly physical force. When that comes out, you shoot to kill. Shoot to chest, center mass. You shoot to the head, wherever it is. That's it. So rest assured, in that particular case, they didn't intentionally try to shoot him in the shoulder. I mean, that's probably a really safe bet with respect to that.
All right. Fascinating discussion. Paul Viollis, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Vlad.